9. My gaze lingers on the metal sign towering over me, where the insignia for Zone 7 looms over the road. I have to keep moving. I can't go home, and there's no one else I can turn to for help. There's nowhere left for me to go, not if I want to survive. Clenching my jaw, I peer down at my arm and tug up the white coat's oversized sleeve until my left wrist is exposed. Even though it isn't visible, I know the chip is there, buried under my skin, a homing beacon to Dr. Richter telling him exactly where I am. A stuttering breath trickles out from between my trembling lips. I can't put this off any longer. I escaped the DSD hours ago, and at every point I stopped to remove the chip, one excuse or another held me back from doing what has to be done to be free of my captors for good. I told myself that if I left it in place, Dr. Richter would be more inclined to keep his distance, because it would seem like I was leading him to Phoenix, just like he wants. That if I removed it before the opportune moment, he would realize what I was planning and send his subordinates to haul me back to his lair. That's what I said to myself, as a way of shifting the blame away from my fear. But the excuses end now. Tremors run over my fingers as I thrust them inside Dr. Richter's coat pocket, a gasp catching in my throat when the jagged edges of the broken mirror graze my skin. My nerves waver, but I tighten my grip, resolved. I can do this, I whisper. With a hurried glance at my seemingly deserted surroundings, I slink into a nearby alley, stepping out of sight of any hidden prying eyes into a shroud of darkness. The cover of shadow obscures my vision, but that might be for the best. I don't want to see what I'm about to do anyway. My hand twitches as I drag the sharp edge of the glass in a horizontal line, a few inches above the hem of the coat, cutting back and forth through the fabric with rough jabs until a mangled strip comes loose from the stitching. I then roll the torn fabric into a ball and jam it inside my mouth, biting down. Exhaling through my nose, I angle the pointed tip of the mirror against my naked wrist. Fear pulses through my body, and for a moment, I don't move any more than that, daunted by the potential consequences of what I'm about to do. One single slip is all it would take. One mistake and I'll die here in this alley. At least then I would be free of Dr. Richter. I shake my head to rid myself of that thought, pushing away the horrific mental image of my possible death. The chips are located in this spot for a reason, so people won't attempt what I'm so foolishly about to do. But it has to be done. There's no other way. Clamping my teeth down, I push the shard into my wrist, piercing the flesh before I can talk myself out of it. A grunt swells in my chest, but my cries are muffled, muted by the ball of cloth in my mouth. Blood pools from the wound and drips from my arm onto the pavement below. My fingers work the glass, turning the tip around inside my arm as my nerve endings scream, making me lightheaded and nauseous and a million other things in between. Still, I jiggle the mirror, searching, even as drowsiness overwhelms me. I squeeze my eyes shut so I don't have to look at the blood, the red somehow startlingly clear in the gloom. I bite down harder, straining my jaw. I have to stay awake. I have to find it. I repeat these words to myself like a chant, clinging to consciousness, until finally, after what seems like hours of agony, the glass tip scrapes something hard. The chip. Gasping, I fall back against the brick wall behind me and peek one eye open, trying not to jostle my arm. Through my blurring vision, I can just make out the glint of gold protruding from my wrist, like a splinter. I tilt the glass shard flat against my palm to free my pointer finger and thumb. which I use to pinch the small piece of metal, tugging it all the way free from my wrist. Wincing, I let out a shaking breath and carefully hold it up to eye level. Fortunately, the chips, which are implanted right after we're born, are only good for identification and tracking purposes, and for making payments, since they're directly linked to our personal bank and pension accounts. They don't keep any record of vital signs, though, which means if I leave the chip here in one piece, it'll look like I've just stopped to rest for the night. Dr. Richter and his team won't have any way of knowing I cut the damn thing out until tomorrow morning when they realize I haven't moved for a while and consider the option that I might be dead. By the time they come to investigate, I'll be long gone from here. Hopefully. The vertigo swarming my head makes me think otherwise, threatening to topple me over. If I allow this exhaustion to consume me, I know I won't get up again. If I let it take hold, I'm as good as dead. Fight. Stay awake. You have to keep moving. At this thought, a burst of adrenaline rushes through my veins, and I find my balance, managing to stay on my feet. Before this energy can fade, I flick the chip into the densest patch of darkness at the other end of the alley, where a large brick wall forms a clear dead end. The shadows swallow that small, discarded piece of my identity whole. I hiss as a burning pain expands over my wrist, the freezing night air grazing across my torn skin, only making my discomfort worse. And with a low growl, I glance at the open wound and the blood, which is showing no signs of stopping or even slowing down anytime soon. My jaw slackens and the balled-up fabric falls from my mouth, unraveling across my outstretched arm as a cloud of steam billows in the air in front of my face, from where my hot breath reacts to the icy cold. Aware I need to get the bleeding under control if I'm going to last beyond the next 10 minutes, I bite at the cloth, my teeth working in an awkward partnership with my fingers, wrapping it around my wrist and pulling the fabric as tight as I can bear. This makeshift bandage won't be enough to staunch the bleeding, but it'll have to do until I can close up the wound, or before I bleed to death, whichever comes first. I blink a few times to clear the fuzzy haze from my eyes and pull Dr. Richter's coat sleeve back into position, the cuff hiding the bulk of the bandage. My fingers loosen to drop the shard, but tighten at the last possible moment when I consider that I might need it again. Any weapon is better than no weapon at all, especially considering where I'm going. Resolved, I drop the bloodied glass back inside the deep pocket. When I push away from the wall, my legs buckle without the support, and the world spins on its axis as a sudden dizziness turns my stomach. Lurching forward, I retch several times, spewing stomach acid and bile onto the pavement. Once the nausea stops triggering my gag reflex, I stumble out of the alley toward freedom. My feet drag and I trip every few steps as I walk, searching for the sign from my vision, shivering against the cold. The night is thick, and the fog clouding my eyes only makes my task that much harder. The streets are empty. I've never been this far from home before, and I can barely even believe I'm in the same city, considering the significant differences between this zone and the one I grew up in. The buildings are derelict, the roads are cracked and filthy, and the narrow homes are stacked so closely together they resemble shacks more than actual houses. The state must not bother with upkeep this far out from the central zones. There aren't even any security cameras hidden among the eaves of the buildings, or attached to the street lamps that I can see. Although, that's a good thing for me, given the fact I'm trying to stay off the DSD's radar. Still, despite my need for invisibility, a shudder of fear ricochets up my spine. Crime in this zone must run rampant without the constant watchful eye of the state. For all I know, I could be walking through these streets with a target on my back. As I trudge forward, frantically searching the shadows for danger, where it might not even exist, I find myself feeling sorry for those unfortunate enough to live out here, regardless of whether they're lawbreakers. Those born here are innocents, subjected to the horrors of residing in an outer zone. In Zone 2, I never had these concerns. Unlike where I'm from, Zone 7 marks the edge of the city, the final zone before reaching the wall separating us from the unknown dangers outside. Other cities lie beyond the heart's borders, but travel to them is prohibited without special clearance from the Board of Travel, which is typically only granted to those individuals working in the highest sectors of society, or to enforcers for the rare occasion when their particular skill set is required somewhere else. This zone is also the home of detention, the group of facilities I initially thought I was imprisoned at when I first woke up in the DSD. Looking back at everything I've been through, I think re-education would have been preferable to Dr. Richter's experiments, even if that meant undergoing brainwashing, or whatever it is they do to keep people in line once they're released after their sentence. Even if it meant I would have spent the rest of my life in a terrible, low-income job and living in a slum just like this one. Anything would have been better than that torture. The toe of my shoe catches on a dip in the pavement, and a gasp rips from my lungs when I trip, my arms thrust out to break my fall, my fingers clasping around the nearest object they can find to save my face from the tarmac. When the ground is no longer rushing upward to meet me, I drag in a few shaking breaths to steady myself. Cold metal digs into my hips, pulling my gaze to the street sign supporting my weight. The emblem for Zone 7 fills my limited field of vision, along with the name of the road, B42. I blink, struggling to believe what I'm seeing. Up until now, part of me was still convinced the visions were nothing more than hallucinations, concocted by my unhinged brain as a way of processing the stress from, first, my placement exam, and then from my time at the DSD. But seeing this sign in front of me, really seeing it, surrounded by a dreary street I've never been to, and yet recognize, it's enough to tell me this is actually happening. It's enough to tell me the visions are real. My eyes skirt along the empty road, following the path as I see it again in my head. There's no one around, but it's late, and if I had to guess, past curfew. I can't imagine anyone takes that risk, not even in the outer zones, since enforcers could be on patrol and are probably less lenient with the citizens here, considering their inferior status. Despite not having any cameras to watch them, it seems even the people living in the slums of Zone 7 abide by this one law of the state. Everyone except me. At the far end of the road, I glimpse the bar from my vision. The exterior of the run-down building is just as I remember it, right down to the halogen sign hanging above the wide metal door. The lights seem to flicker at my approach, the bulbs buzzing with a hum of warning. My feet maneuver around the rain-filled potholes, my steps slow and breathing labored. By the time I reach the door, my heart is beating so hard and fast I can barely think straight. Swallowing, I raise my hand only to hesitate with my fingers an inch from the rusty handle. Whoever I find on the other side of this door will change my life. I know it. The actions I take here will set me on a path I won't be able to turn from. If I step through this door, all hope of my old life is gone. Am I ready for that? Nodding, I brace myself and pull. As the door swings open, I'm greeted by low amber lighting and the musty, stale smell of old smoke. The stench leaves a strange taste on my tongue, and I grimace, snapping my mouth shut when the odor hits me. Breathing through my nose, I straighten my face into a neutral expression and step into the Vega. As soon as I pass over the threshold, Every eye in the room turns to look at me, as if my presence has set off an alarm, stopping me short. I loiter by the doorway, unsure what to do. Driven by my natural inclination to blend in, I inch forward and plop down on a stool at the bar. The bald bartender watches me, with one eyebrow cocked as he dries the glass in his hand, with the same dirty rag I saw in my vision. A toothpick sticks out of the left corner of his mouth. "What can I get you?" he asks in a gruff voice. I lick my dried lips, suddenly parched and desperate for a drink. How did I not realize how thirsty I am until now? "Water," I croak. With a laugh, he shakes his head and picks up another glass to dry it. "You're in a bar, sweet cheeks. Water ain't exactly on the menu. You'll have to order something a bit more toxic." I bite my lip. Alcoholic beverages aren't common in Zone 2. In the higher echelons of society, drinking is seen as a degrading habit, and because of that, it's no longer legal in many places across the heart. The only reason it hasn't been banned in the outer zones is because consumption still provides a steady income stream and escape from reality for the poor. With little else to rely on, they need the support. Either that, or the state is hoping it will eventually kill them. Although I've never consumed alcohol before, I know from my schooling that it won't ease my thirst. Besides, I have no way to pay for a drink now that I don't have my chip. But from the way the bartender glares at me, I know that if I don't order something soon, there's a good chance I'll be asked to leave, or be forcibly removed. Then everything I did to get here, like murdering that attendant, and nearly killing myself by cutting the tracking chip from my wrist, all of it will have been for nothing. As I consider what to do, my eyes trail over the dark, stuffy room, taking in the familiar but unfamiliar surroundings. They almost complete one full rotation of the space before catching on the occupied stool 2 seats down from mine. As I take in the shadowed profile of the man sitting there, I forget all about the bartender, who still stands in front of me, waiting for my answer. The sole focus of my attention is the man perched on that seat. "Well?" The bartender's deep voice shakes me free of my thoughts, and I force my gaze back to him, clearing my throat. "I'll have what he's having." I look left, risking another glance at the stranger from my vision. The reason why I'm here. The bartender follows my gaze. "Sure thing." He buzzes around behind the counter, returning a moment later with a large glass of amber liquid, which he places in front of me with a disgruntled frown, observing me with narrowed eyes. I wait for him to ask for payment, but he says nothing, instead moving on to serve another customer. I let out a breath, confused but relieved. I've dodged a bullet for now. I stare at the tall, chipped glass with uncertainty. I have no idea what to say or do from this point. I didn't plan anything beyond getting here. Maybe because I didn't think I would actually make it this far. Or maybe because I know how crazy this all is. I let my gaze drift back to Ezra Laramie, watching him out of my peripheral vision. Pushing aside my shock that he even exists, I ask myself what I should do. Should I tell him I was kidnapped by the DSD after seeing the end of the world during my placement exam? After having a vision that, following months of torture, he just so happened to appear in? I wouldn't blame him if he didn't believe me. Hell, I wouldn't blame him if he were to try to kill me at the mere mention of the DSD. My fingers wrap around the glass, gripping tightly, and I lift the brim to my lips, hoping the drink will help clear my head. The taste washing over my tongue is unpleasant, and I sputter and choke as the bitter liquid slips down my throat. Coughing, I shove the glass away from me. It's an acquired taste. My body tenses at the enchanting cadence of his voice. Although I've only heard him speak once, I know I would recognize that sound anywhere. My heart slams into my ribs as I pivot on my stool. When our eyes meet, he jerks his chin toward my glass, his gaze flashing briefly down then back up again, locking on mine. I glance at the barely touched liquid, embarrassed. He swings around on his own stool to face me. "You're not from around here." It's not a question. "I'm here on business," I answer quickly. "Business?" Skepticism creases his brow, a slight smile tugging up one corner of his mouth as he throws back the rest of his drink. "There isn't much business going down in Zone 7. My throat tightens. "Not even with Phoenix?" The stool legs creak as he shifts over onto the seat between us, bringing himself closer to me. Leaning in so his lips are practically touching my ear, he growls, "I don't know who you are, but you won't find anything involved with Phoenix here. I'd stop looking if I were you." He pulls away, his hazel eyes returning to mine, as Dr. Richter's warning purrs in my head. "If you think you can trust him, you're wrong. If you think he'll protect you, he won't." A shiver coaxes goosebumps to rise on my arms. I push away my unease, focusing on why I came here. It doesn't matter who I do or don't trust. And like I told Dr. Richter, I don't need anyone's protection, nor do I expect it. The people of the heart have always only cared about themselves and their own individual survival. Why would Phoenix be any different? No. All I want are answers. And like everyone else, I just want to survive. Then why else would you be here? I ask before muttering the one thing I know will definitely get his attention. Ezra Laramie. His eyes spring wide as his name breaches my lips in a hiss. And in response, he jumps to his feet, stumbling back a few steps. The stool he was sitting on tips and clatters to the floor with a bang. As he backs away from me, his gaze drops to the coat tucked around my frail body, his attention fixing on the insignia embroidered over my breast. His eyes dart back up to mine. "Who are you?" Before I can answer, he pulls something free from his belt and throws his arm up, pointing a gun at me. My heart pounds in my ears as I slide off the stool, my balance unsteady as I stare down the polished black barrel. "Who are you?" he asks again, shouting this time. The other dozen or so people in the bar are all standing as well now, watching our altercation with interest. Every last one is holding a weapon, including the bartender, who fixes me with a glare that could melt steel as he pulls a shotgun out from under the counter. As panic twists my insides, it occurs to me this bar must be a safe house for Phoenix members. The people in this room are all likely part of the group or supported in one way or another, explaining why my vision led me here. Gulping, I turn my attention back to Ezra. "This isn't how it looks." "Is that so?" he sneers. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're one of them." I'm not. My protest is weak and unconvincing, even to my own ears. He pushes the cold muzzle of the gun against my right temple, sending a shudder through my body which rocks me right down to my marrow. He takes a step closer, lowering his voice to a venomous snarl. "And why should I believe you?" I tense my jaw, spitting my response through clenched teeth. If I was one of them, reinforcements would already be here. The state doesn't play games. As a member of Phoenix, he must know that better than anyone. The state wouldn't waste time sending in a single person to clear out this bar, when it could more efficiently get the job done by sending a whole team to exterminate the lot. If I was one of them, the enforcers would already be here. If I was one of them, he would already be dead. A flicker of doubt crosses his face, and he wavers. The point of his gun moves away from my skin, coaxing an unbidden whimper from my throat. His eyes cling to mine, making my heart beat even faster. We can't take any chances, an older man grumbles behind him. We should kill her to be sure. Terror shreds my composure to pieces as Ezra pushes the gun against my forehead. How do you know my name? He presses. I stare at him, unsure how to answer that question. He won't believe the truth. Not yet, anyway. And if I lie, that'll only give him cause to shoot me. I swallow again, trying to push down the rising lump in my throat, intent on choking me. My tongue feels too big for my mouth, and I can't seem to remember how to breathe properly, let alone speak. A shadow spreads across Ezra's face, seeping into the details of the bar and casting the world around me in a muted gray darkness. My fingers reach out for the counter to steady myself, but my hand doesn't find the edge. As I sway, Ezra takes a reflexive step back, his expression switching from anger to horror. My vision doubles as I follow his line of sight to the growing puddle of red on the floor by my feet. My eyes drift down to my wrist, noting the red staining the sleeve of Dr. Richter's white coat. I've bled through the bandage. I realize, my thoughts hazy. Looks like blood loss will be what kills me. I should have known what I did would catch up with me. I was stupid to think this would end any other way but with me dead. My knees buckle and I stagger forward a step. As I search for something to focus on, I see Ezra, just like he was in my vision. Everything about him is exactly the same. His face, his hair, those hazel eyes. But unlike the vision, there are no tears. And why would there be? We don't know each other. He won't cry for me when I die. I stumble again and collapse to the floor, the bar vanishing into the dark void of blood loss. Arms snake around me, breaking my fall, warm against my shivering body. A sob escapes my throat at their touch. Unconsciousness creeps in at the edges of my vision, but flickers of Ezra's face, present and future, help to keep me awake. He must have been the one who caught me. He shouts over his shoulder at someone behind him, but I can't make out what he says. His hands are covered with blood. My blood. A pressure pushing down on my wrist makes me moan. All at once, the pain and fear are both gone, and when Ezra looks down at me, doubt flooding those haunted eyes, I can't help it. I smile. Maybe I do it because I am delirious, or maybe I'm just relieved I won't have to face death alone. I don't really know, and it doesn't really matter. Not anymore. I saw you. I breathe, pressing a bloodied hand to his cheek as the world goes black.